Joey, the red button is record.
It's recording. We're here. We are live finally at the RenoFam Podcast. The RenoFam Podcast is...
Shout out to the live band playing some smooth tunes.
Smooth tunes.
Smooth tunes.
You gotta have tunes.
And you gotta have a live band.
Yeah. They're just back behind the wall.
Behind the wall.
Behind the whole plane, yeah. My name is Joey, and this podcast is designed to help equip parents to be the spiritual leaders of their home. But this podcast comes with a massive disclaimer, and that is I am no expert parent.
Neither is your guest.
No expert. And but I do want to get better. You probably feel the same way, so my hope is that we learn together. The RenoFam Podcast is a ministry of Renovation Church in Hampstead, North Carolina.
Also brought to you by the live remake of The Lion King based on the logo.
There it is, yes.
Can you feel... If you look closely, ladies and gentlemen, Nala and Simba are rubbing heads with each other, which is the lion way of saying, what up?
What up? What up? Well, today on the podcast, we have Stuart Hall, and according to the bio that his wife wrote, he is a 30-year veteran of working with teenagers and influencing the next generation.
30-plus years, but keep going.
30-plus.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
That just means that I knew Jesus when he was in high school.
I'm 30-plus years old. So. Stuart is the Director of Student Leadership and Leadership Networking for Orange, and also leads an initiative called INFLUNSR.
That part's true.
Dedicated to creating student leaders worth following.
Worth following.
Yeah, it's big.
Everybody's a leader, but are you a leader worth following?
That's
we should
true.
talk about that sometime.
We will. We'll do that on the next podcast.
On the next one.
That's right.
Are we still pressing record?
Record stuff. For those of you joining in, this is our third try at this. First time in. He's co-authored 3 books, The 7 Checkpoints, 7 Principles Every Teenager Needs to Know, and Max Q, Developing Students of Influence with Andy Stanley.
Always notice my name is very small on that book. There's a reason why I'm the co-author.
But what, in 10 seconds, what is it like to write a book with Andy Stanley?
English class hell.
If you don't know who Andy Stanley is, you may know his dad.
Yes,
Charles
Stanley,
Stanley.
who actually announced today that he is stepping down.
Really?
As pastor at First Baptist Atlanta.
Wow.
Yes, that's a big.
I mean, he was
big deal.
Known as America's pastor.
For real.
Yeah.
But he had just announced it today.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's
He's
something.
going into retirement. Yeah.
Yes.
Good for him.
But Andy is his black sheep child.
There you go. And the last book, Wired, for a Life of
Leadership
Worship.
edition. Yeah.
Leadership edition with Louie Giglio.
Yeah.
So
completely different experience.
very different. Stuart speaks everywhere. Big Stuff camps, the Orange Conference. He'll even speak in a tent with no AC in the middle of July.
Shout out Crowder's Ridge.
Come on, Crowder's Ridge. Stuart is married, way out of his league, to Kelly. Way out.
Oh, let's just pause for a second. Okay, keep going.
Okay, all right. He has 3 children that are more talented than mine and yours combined. He's also the love child of Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly together. Stuart, thanks for being on the podcast, man.
Oh my gosh, that last zinger hits way too close to home.
That's what you get for picking on my logo.
You know, I wasn't picking on your logo. I've told you multiple times I like your logo.
By Visual Jams.
Visual Jams.
Shout
who
out
I will
Visual
be
Jams.
shouting out very soon.
Yeah, James Graves. Yeah.
Because I like your logo so much.
Yeah, he killed it.
And also, saying I'm the love child of Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly is also a very kind way of saying he has a good personality. But
do you ever get stopped?
Oh, come on, dude. You want me to tell that story, really?
Tell us.
Detroit, Michigan airport. 5:30 in the morning, Starbucks, I'm in line. This dude taps me on the shoulder. I turn around, and he's giggling. And he's like, man, I just want to tell you were hysterical in Step Brothers.
Step Brothers. Out of all the movies,
and I don't know which one he's talking about because I do. Am I Will Ferrell or am I John C. Reilly?
That's right.
So I just said, don't touch my drum set. And just walked.
Best as a drummer, that's the only scene I remember from the whole movie.
Did you touch my drum set?
Then the question is, why are you so sweaty?
Because I was watching Cops.
If you've ever gotten sweaty watching Cops,
yes,
you are a criminal.
Yeah, or you're having a heart attack.
Go see a doctor.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. So, Stuart, you have been hanging out with us the last two Sundays.
I feel like I've been in this podcast booth for 24 hours.
Welcome to. You become part of the family. You're here so long. Yeah.
Which one's my?
You can't get out though.
Yeah.
It's that kind of family.
Yes.
But So you've been here with us the last 2 weeks. We're going to kind of get into some of that, some of the main things you've been talking about, because there's so much amazing stuff you've shared. But here's the first thing. Just how did you get started Speaking. I mean, you travel the country speaking. Some people call you a national speaker.
I think snot just happened. Sorry.
How did you get to doing that?
Oh gosh. Well, I can say unequivocally, there's not a bone in my body that actually wants to travel and speak for a living. Mm-hmm. But that has never been a goal whatsoever.
Yeah.
The long story short is I was a local church youth pastor for 13 years, never traveled and spoke much when I was a youth pastor. All my time was, like you, with my head down in the trenches, trying to love kids and help their families. Kelly and I made a decision to step out in faith and go to work for an international youth ministry organization that was based in Atlanta. That's how we wound up in Atlanta. We're living in Louisiana at the time. In the organization I went to work for, you had to raise support, interestingly enough, Kelly was fired up about it more than I was. And this is the story of our love story is she believes in me much more than I believe in myself. Mm-hmm. So she's like, you can do this. Mm-hmm. And I'm not exaggerating. We step away from that position in November 1997, and it was like the floodgates opened and people just started, and we weren't they were just texting me, hey man, can you come speak here and blah, blah, blah. And we made a decision at that point because the phone started ringing a lot that, maybe this is a door we should walk through. And it certainly helped us raise money to move and all that kind of stuff. But we just made a decision at that point that we're never going to market ourselves. And that way we know whose fingerprints are on it.
Yeah.
Because if the phone stops ringing, it's time for me to stop speaking. And that's, all the rest of it is, I think, us trying really hard to serve people. Mm-hmm. The tough part about what we're talking about is Kelly and I have never met any. This is going to sound so harsh, and somebody may listen to this and go, well, you just don't know somebody I know, or you don't know me. We've never met anybody that travels and speaks for a living. Like that's all they do. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they have the kind of marriage that we want to have, and they've raised the kind of kids that we want to raise. So, it's a part of what I do, but it's not the main thing. And the most important thing is, who am I when I step off stage? It's not who I am up on the platform. Because
absolutely.
You and I both know people that can fool you.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that you said years ago, and I'll never forget it, is you just told me one day, I don't want to be famous. No. We were looking at talking about different people that we know that just speak and do all this stuff. And you're like, I never want to be famous. Yeah. And I was like, man, that's so counterintuitive.
Right. Because everything in us wants to, And I told you this yesterday. I am recognized more in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I'm only here like 5 Sundays of the summer.
You should run for mayor.
It happened last night at dinner. Somebody, 3 or 4 people came by when we went to dinner last week.
Dinner, yeah. What was that? A whole family, 2 waitresses, and the bill got picked up.
I know.
Every time Stuart's in town, we go eat.
Got picked up last night too. Somebody picked up the bill.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is so stinking kind. But Kelly and I were talking about this on the way back from church this morning. Yeah. Nobody ever does that for us at home. Well, maybe that's what Jesus meant by the prophet is not welcome.
Not welcome in his own home. Yeah. Well,
you get your own bill, buddy.
And because I know you, that would literally be the last thing you would ever want someone to do for you. I mean, it would just.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I would rather do it for somebody else. But.
Yeah, 100%.
So whoever that was, both times, thank you.
That was awesome.
Yeah, especially in Christendom, why would you want to? It's a pseudo thing anyway.
It is.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing too.
Yeah.
When you have that much power.
Oof. Yeah. Hashtag Jerry Falwell.
I mean, I'm a master's student from Liberty, and my wife, master's still in work, still in process, but my wife graduated from there as well. Right. I mean, it's just like, hey, when you have power,
right,
and you have that, I mean, it's a hook.
Right. I think it was, now. I don't know who it was that said that. Oh, it was Abraham Lincoln who said that the greatest test of your integrity is not adversity, it's power. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, fame is a snake charmer. We talked about this yesterday. Yeah. Because you start getting a little bit of success, or you get a platform, or you get a microphone. Mm-hmm. There's a very easy way, by the way, to keep an idiot busy, and that's to give them a microphone.
Yeah, right.
Because you just start thinking your voice is important. And there are certain things that I should never speak on because I haven't done the heavy lifting about them. But I think what notoriety and fame and success does is it convinces you. My opinion about everything matters. If you don't believe me, look at social media, because what social media has done, someone has wisely coined it as the death of expertise.
Yeah.
So everybody thinks they're an expert now.
Yeah.
And COVID's a great example because everybody's graduated from the University of Facebook School of Medicine.
Exactly.
So
School of Medicine. Some of them are top of the
top
class.
of the class. Unbelievable. They have, yeah.
Well, looking at that and talking about teenage culture, let's just jump, since you mentioned COVID, let's jump into that. How do you think COVID is going to impact students and teenagers from this point on?
Well, it already has. Last night at dinner with John and Tita, my wife stopped an older couple who she had overheard talking about having the virus. And Kelly was telling them I was a survivor, and they were telling us that they had gotten it. And I said jokingly, at this point, we're all survivors.
Yeah, right.
All of us are.
Sure.
And that's especially true of the next generation, because I think they have felt this probably in many ways more than people. Like, if you haven't gotten sick, it may be the next generation that has felt it the most, simply because their entire framework of existence has gotten flipped upside down. You know, our oldest daughter had to graduate from college in our living room virtually. Yeah. And she's one of a ton of stories like that. So I think there was already a pandemic in play with the next generation. And it wasn't COVID-19. It was loneliness. Yeah, and we've talked about this a little bit at Renovation. If you look at all the data, alcohol, drug abuse, sexual activity is kind of trending down among Generation Z, but loneliness, depression, and the suicide rate is spiked at an all-time high. And I think all the pandemic has done is contributed to that. Yeah. And it will be a while before we can kind of right that ship, if we right it at all. I think the family unit, the nuclear family, extended families, etc., the pandemic has definitely impacted that, and that in turn impacts Generation Z. I'm not sure we can overstate how much stability at home contributes to a young person's psyche. And if there's instability at home, whether it's lose a job, lose revenue, that, like, you begin to go, my entire existence is kind of, topsy-turvy, and I can't trust it. The economy. And I think the economy coupled with how the education process has changed. Here's the harsh reality. Digital learning is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. To say goodbye to snow days. Because those are gone. But so digital learning isn't going anywhere, and it's actually a gift to us, but we don't see it that way right now, because there are some kids that is just not their jam, but they're being forced to do it. What's happening in colleges. You have 30,000 students on a college campus all sitting in their dorms taking classes online. Right. Yeah. And so we wonder why, for a variety of reasons, every Friday and Saturday night the bars are packed. Yeah. It's because they want to be around people. Which is another point, I think. Yeah. I think Generation Z is understanding how invaluable community is. Like that. You were telling me about our squad.
We were getting ready to launch again. Our squad is our student ministry, and they meet in homes throughout our community. We're a portable church, so having a place midweek isn't there. And so we said, hey, let's do this. And our youth guy, Jordan, who has just absolutely killed it in this pandemic. Stud. I mean, he years ago, I remember you talking about teenagers having a digital heartbeat. And in COVID, that was the one he tapped into that one in a big way, and then reinforced it by creating student leaders, just some amazing stuff. But he said, hey, when we kick off our squad in the fall, I'm going to sign up for homes. And like me being the old youth pastor, I'm like, sign-ups Students don't sign up. Parents sign up.
Are you going to have a good band and some pretty girls and pizza?
Nobody goes to a list. He throws it out there on social media, and within a week we had 100 students signed up to their houses.
That's nuts.
So, I mean, there's this craving for being together in community.
No question. Yes.
And I was looking at some stuff. Common Sense Media said they did a poll with teenagers that 61% of teens are worried that they or someone in their family will be exposed to the virus. So you got that piece of it, but then 63 are worried about how it will affect their family's ability to make a living. A 61%.
Right.
And I think high 40s said that they were more lonely than they've ever been before, which is scary, as somebody who works Next Generation, because suicide rates were already so high.
Right.
We're not talking about that
and
enough.
And you're talking half of the student population, almost half of the student population.
Saying they're more lonely than they ever were.
That's crazy.
But I just think it's one of those things that as we continue learning through this, we've got to keep that generation in mind. And how are we setting them up, not just for success, relational success? That's good. You know, how do we make sure they're dialed in from a bedroom? And
to remember too that everything is spiritual. So part of the dilemma for the home in America, especially as it relates to faith and community, has been we have bought the lie, hook, line, and sinker, much like we do with the education system, that I take my kids to school, you guys teach them arithmetic and English, and we take our kids to church and you guys teach them Jesus. And the reality is everything is spiritual. So even the pandemic, what the pandemic does is it provides a stress test for your faith. And if parents don't step up to the plate and walk with their kids with empathy and sympathy, because it has completely, we're on the phone every single day with a sophomore in college daughter who's an athlete as well. And it is, every day is different. And what we've realized, even though I hate the term the new normal, it is the new normal. And every day is going to be like that. So distancing yourself from your children doesn't help your children. The interesting thing too, having a 25-year-old, 23-year-old, and 20-year-old, the older your children get, the more it seems like they don't want to spend time with you. They don't want to talk to you. They don't want to share their issues and problems with you and burdens. It's not that your teenagers, especially those that are older, don't want to spend time with you and talk to you. The difference is they want to spend time and talk to you and hang out with you when they want to spend time with you and talk to you. And we as parents have to have our spidey senses even more during this time because of the loneliness thing. If a kid decides, hey, I need some mom and dad time, drop everything you're doing. Because
especially this.
Yes. Yes.
Get rid of that.
Get rid of that. And what do you need? Because those, like, you miss those opportunities enough times and they'll stop coming to you. So that's the challenge for us as parents, because we automatically think teenagers don't want to have anything to do with their parents. It's just not true.
Right.
They just want to they want it the time when they want the time. Whereas before, when you have them control, you're going to have time with me. Yeah. And then your son gets big enough to pick you up, and you're like, okay.
Well, then like my brother and me were very different. Personalities, everything. My brother's time though, like he didn't do a lot of talking, but for some reason late at night. That's when he was talking to mom and dad, and mom's like, well, I got to be there for that. I mean, just recognizing that. We've been talking about parents the last 2 weeks here, and you've kind of worked off of this big idea. We've said a lot, but about parents and spiritual influence. So walk us through that idea, because it's going to kind of be the reinforcement the rest of our conversation.
Well, what I talked about this morning explicitly is the idea. Mom and dad are the primary spiritual influence in the life of their children. It doesn't matter where you are in your spiritual journey. You will always be the primary spiritual influence in the life of your kids, which means that your children are taking the vast majority of their spiritual cues from you. Most of us as parents, though, if you think about it, if we are the primary spiritual influence, then we have to understand what influence is. Influence, generally speaking, this is how I defined it today, is building strong relational bridges that'll bear the weight of truth we have to give. That's our job.
Strong
parents.
Relational bridges. Slow that down. For me, slow that down a little bit. Strong relational bridges.
So we have to build strong relationships with our kids. Like the first and foremost thing that I have to do is have relational equity with my children. I have to have cheese in the bank.
Right.
And trust is the currency of relationship, and the way you earn trust is time.
Yeah.
So I need to build incredibly strong relational bridges that'll bear the weight, because there are going to be heavy times where I have to correct, where I have to teach, where I have to guide, where I have to lead. And if you don't have a strong relational bridge, and you have to, if the only kind of love you have is tough love, that's not tough love. You're a jerk.
Yeah.
But there are times when you have to have tough love if you're a parent that cares, because I want to care more about my kid than I do my relationship with my kid. And so we get that mixed up sometimes because I don't want to, but those times are much fewer and far between than we think they are.
Yeah.
Because do you want to be right, or do you want to have influence?
Sure. Yep.
I want to make sure that you're on the right path. I don't want you to drive yourself off a cliff. All that to say, though, so as you're building that strong relational bridge, will it bear the weight of whatever's coming down the pipe? And and a great example is with the pandemic.
Sure. Yeah.
Like something heavy comes, do you have enough relational equity that your children are going to trust you when all hell breaks loose in their life? That's kind of the idea. And then today, specifically, we put some really practical handles around that. Like, what does it mean to be strategic relationally, and what does it mean to be strategic with truth? Yeah.
You talked about one of the things that I think it was in your third point. You talked about the questions that we ask our kids. So, and you talked a little bit about the questions your father asked, which were,
did you win?
Did you win?
How many points did you score?
Yeah.
Were you the best? Yeah. And what I began to conclude is that this relationship is transactional.
So as a parent, I'm wanting to create authentic faith in my child.
Right.
You said we've got to start asking questions
that are different.
Yeah. Which were?
Well, I think the easiest way, I think we probably have to back up a little bit.
Yeah.
And backing up a little bit is who you want your children to be as a parent, and who God wants our children to be.
Right.
Are they the same to be?
Yeah.
And when you look at the New Testament, this was the crux of everything I talked about today. And it really is a game changer, because we do, like, if this bottle, for those of you who are following along on YouTube, if this bottle is the core of who God is, then there will be concentric circles back away from this bottle. And to me, the core of who God is love.
Yeah.
And I think the New Testament screams it. In fact, the heavy lifting that I've been doing since getting sick has been at that piece.
Yeah.
At the core of who God is, what is he? And I made the statement today that I'm not sure people understand how life-altering this statement is. Love is not something that God does. Love is who God is.
Yes.
We think love is transactional. And so consequently, especially those of us who've grown up in church, we shy away from the idea that about developing the fruit of the Spirit in our kids: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness, goodness, self-control. I added 4, I think, today.
Big fruit tree.
Yeah, it's a giant fruit tree. Many blossoms. We think that sounds like doing. Because we always think about love as me doing something for you.
I mean, even as a kid, Jesus loves me.
Right.
This I know. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
When in reality, for all my Reformed people out there, you are making much of God. You are making much of Jesus when you love. How? It's who he is.
Yeah.
It's who he is.
Right.
It would be different if God is this, but he does love. No. It's who he is.
God is love.
God is love. And so as our children are growing up in God, we should be asking questions that begin to help them massage out the fruit of the Spirit. John says that the Spirit in you is proof that God lives in you.
Yes.
So if that's the case, then love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control should be evident.
Yeah.
Growing.
Yeah.
And at some point, at some point for us as adults, I think we have to swallow hard and ask ourselves this question. If you call something a fruit tree, but it doesn't bear any fruit, do you still keep calling it a fruit tree?
Yeah. Right.
And for us as moms and dads, if this is who God says the to be is, and we say it is, but we keep asking questions that lead to another outcome, then we've got to change the questions that we're asking.
Yeah, and so let's expand on that a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, this wasn't in the thing, but in the questions I gave.
Oh no!
You. But
we're going off track.
What are some of those? What are some of those questions? What are some of the, like? If you're talking to your kids, if you're talking to Cameron, like what are some of those questions that you're asking?
Yeah, I think a great question as it relates to faith is: Are you learning to love God by trusting Him?
Yeah.
Like. And we talked about this yesterday a little bit. To me, and even in the interview, when we did the interview with you, authentic faith is God is who He says He is, who Jesus said He is, and who Jesus proved that He was, and that He'll do everything He's promised He'll do. And since God is love, then it only makes sense that the way that I learn to love God is to trust what He says.
Yeah.
It would be the equivalent of Kelly and I in relationship with each other and me not choosing to trust what Kelly says is true about her, about our relationship, about what she wants the best for me, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So then it becomes a question of, okay, well then what has God promised me?
Yeah.
Which now you are... we want to talk about deep. That's where it gets fun, because there are some things in the scriptures that you can trust God for. We tend to trust Him for things He hasn't promised us, and then we get disillusioned, and we're like, "Well, I can't love Him because I can't trust Him." Well, hold on, He hasn't promised. Like in my COVID situation,
Yeah, and just for people listening to it, Stuart had COVID so bad he slept through it. Like you were in a like he didn't just have like you had it so bad you didn't know how bad it was. I mean,
I really
coma.
did. Yeah. And just so you know that I was in a coma has a 1 year statute of limitations on it. I can only use that excuse for a year, and then I got to find a different one. But that is true. I mean, I was.
It's a miracle that you're here.
It really is. But I mean, literally, almost died three times.
Yeah.
So, and we talked about this a bit in the interview, but the thing that Kelly inspired me the most about, and this was the example, as I talked about today, that consistent repetition.
Yep.
The example she was to our children of how she prayed. God, I know that you can heal our dad, my husband. I'm not sure you will, but I believe that you can. It puts you in this place of submission and trust.
Yeah.
Whereas the other way some of us have grown up in church and been taught to pray is I'm going to demand things of God. Yep. First of all, He's your Father. Yep. Second of all, has He promised you that?
Yeah.
So I think that's a great question. I think it's a great question as we defined love today, this intentional promotion of the overall intellectual, emotional, physical, spiritual well-being of other people, like asking a question that helps your kids think about their relationships with their friends in that vein is a game changer. It's a game changer. Like, are you considering your friends before you consider you? Are you promoting their well-being? That question also for our kids that are older runs into their sexual integrity.
Yeah, sure.
Like, if this relationship goes in the direction that it seems to be going, is that the overall well-being of this person physically and emotionally?
Yeah.
Spiritually? Not you.
Right, yeah. Not you,
even
but
though,
for them.
But for them.
Yeah, yeah. Am I keeping their best? Am I showing love by treating them the best way the way that Jesus would?
And you can see how God wanted this to work, because if we're both doing that, good Lord, we would all be in such a better place.
Yeah, because love doesn't demand.
It doesn't. But so now you kind of get an idea of the question. So as it relates to your spiritual habits, like instead of us depending on things like scripture memory, Bible study, worship, meditation, journaling, we almost look at those things as the markers for spiritual growth. Those really are expressions of love.
Yeah. I'm hiding God's word in my heart so that I might not sin against Him, because I love Him so
and
much.
I want to love others.
Yeah. These are not bad things.
Correct.
They're I love that. They're expressions.
It would be How do I know that you love Kelly? We date. That doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah.
But you ask her, and she would say, "Well, this is how Stuart puts me first. This is how Stuart trusts me." We date is I go to church. We date is I worship. We date is I memorize scripture. But those are expressions of love. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It does.
And then as it relates to your choices, like, are your choices setting you up to love better or worse? You know, is this choice going to intentionally promote, whether it's me or somebody else? You know, considering other people for yourself is an act of love. Trusting authority in your life is trust is a currency of relationship. Can I trust this person has my best interest in heart? So I think those are the things. And then also, and we didn't have time to do this today, and we don't really have time to do it on the podcast, but what exactly does Paul mean when he says love, joy? What is joy? Joy is a condition of your soul.
It's a choice.
It's different than happiness too, by the way, because happiness depends on what happens. Joy is a condition of your soul. Love, joy, peace. Like I have like, why are you so anxiety ridden? What's going on there? I think that's a great question with your kids. Patience. One interesting thing about the term gentleness in the fruit of the Spirit is we have a tendency to think gentleness is, you would never want to call a football player gentle, right?
Right.
But it actually means strong bowels in the original Greek, which means BMs. No. Strong bowels is literally a picture of intestinal fortitude. It's like grit.
Grit, yeah.
So is this is my kid exhibiting perseverance, self-control? Some of those things are really obvious that you can start asking questions. Because what you want to do is that's where I need to pour in love. Yeah, that's where I need to love better as a parent.
Yeah, my daughter, with COVID going on, she loves school, and so we've decided, just with the way things are being done, looking at our kids, the best thing for them it was to homeschool. And my wife was prepared for that. Really, even before summer began, we started kind of having this conversation. But she loves school; she missed that. So then she has some health issues that are going on where she's having these seizure-like activities that we can't get a thumb on yet. God's going to show it to us, and we're going to figure this thing out. I really believe that. But right now we're in about 4 months of it, and we don't know. Well, then she falls off a trampoline and breaks her foot in 3 places, and she was like riding in the truck. She's like, why is this happening? Why? And she was angry. And I said, Haley, I said, here's what's so crazy about all this. I said, can you believe that God wants us to be joyful even when times are tough? And she kind of got quiet for a minute. And she's like, yeah, that's hard to believe. I was like, no, that's...
What a stupid God.
Right? I mean, like, for her little mind, she's like, I was like, Haley, it can always be... Has
God ever worn a pink cast? He does not understand what's going on here.
This itches. That's her thing. That poor thing, she itches all the time. But it's like having those moments where, hey, did you know that this is, it's easy to be joyful when things are good, and that's really happiness. But we're going to choose to be joyful even when things are tough. And I've got another friend of mine, parents that are listening, Dr. George Gates is going to come in and talk to us about, he's a amazing psychologist, but he's going to come talk about kids and trauma and during this time and how we can navigate it. But I love the way that you put that. We've got to start asking questions that bring us back
to the end,
to those values.
Yes. Yeah. And the thing too, sometimes it's as simple, because what we're trying to do is help our kids become self-aware. Like, it's one thing for you as a parent to ask those questions, but when our kids start asking themselves that question, and they can start self-governing themselves, now you're on to something. It's that old adage of, teach a man to fish and he eats forever. Fish for a day and he'll eat once. Like, we want to teach our kids to learn how to begin to ask themselves that question. But if all they're ever hearing are transactional questions. Did you win? It doesn't mean that their grades shouldn't be important, and it should. They should be. If they compete in things, they should do it as unto the Lord. I'm the biggest proponent of that.
Yeah.
But if that's all they ever hear from us, we are setting them up to fail, I think.
A kid that can ask themselves questions. Am I being self-controlled in this situation?
Oof.
A teenager that can ask that, hey, I'm walking into a really difficult time, maybe it's with a teacher or with other, am I walking through this in self-control? I mean, has the potential not only just to express the love of Christ in a way that no one else saw coming, but also gives that teenager or that kid some really great opportunities for wisdom. I mean, just to be able to navigate things.
Yeah.
One of the things that we have a family verse, and for God did not give us a spirit of fear, but a power and love and a sound mind. And it's probably once a week. I'm like, all right, let's go back to our verse, and I'm like, sound mind, that's self-control. Right?
Our family verse was Jesus wept.
Jesus wept.
Jesus wept because raising y'all is hard.
That's it. I knew I had to have something.
Why did y'all make me cry?
And for those of you who think that I've had this family verse since I was a high school student journalist, not even true. The first 3 years we didn't have one up, and then it was just really it was working with kids and students with anxiety. And I said, what do I want to plant? What kind of seed do I want to plant? And that was just a verse that kept coming into my mind.
Yeah, that's so good.
I just felt like this is the thing that, and we talked about earlier, suicide and all that. Man, anxiety just has such a hold. I was like, let's just plant this one, and
that's good,
and see what happens.
Yeah, our family verse was probably Solomon talking about wisdom, like he who walks with the wise grows wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm.
I didn't mean to laugh.
You
at that.
I thought you were
going to the songs. Yeah,
no, I wasn't cracking a joke. But seriously, our kids can probably quote that backwards and forwards because I think it's probably 95% of life is not black and white. It's gray. So developing that capacity to make wise choices is so important.
Let's talk about parents in getting in the game. And we had this conversation off of a conversation you had with somebody that you did ministry with years ago.
Yes.
And the idea, and you teased this out some even this morning, but the idea was that the church has become the surrogate parent for the spiritual development in kids and in students. What's wrong with that picture? What do we need to change? Let's tease that idea out a little bit.
Well, the question that was proposed to me is by a guy that was my associate for 5 years and one of my very best friends, and like you guys really dove in and was so encouraging to Kelly and our kids when I was sick. So he calls me, a month and a half ago, and I remember I was in my garage and I had to sit down. He goes, hey, he's now a lead pastor at a really, really cool church in Shreveport, Louisiana, and their church mission statement is love God, love people, solve problems.
I love that.
And he said, the pandemic, in his opinion, and I couldn't agree with him more, he said, I feel like the pandemic has exposed our parents at our church. I think they had 5,000 people this past Easter. So it's a crazy cool place. They don't have a building like y'all. They meet in the Shreveport Civic Center every Sunday. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, our parents are panicking because we're, until we get to phase 3, whatever phase 3 is, we're not going to meet yet. And he said, and it's caused me to start thinking. And he said, I want to ask you a question. He was very respectful. He wasn't being mean. He said, have you ever stopped to think about the fact that you've been doing youth ministry 30 plus years? He and I did it for 5 years of his 18 years of doing youth ministry before he became pastor. He said, have you ever thought about the fact that you and I have experienced every major important spiritual marker in the life of teenagers and not their parents? Camps, retreats, mission trips, a kid choosing to follow Jesus, a kid recommitting their life to follow Jesus, confession, addiction, relational conflict, forgiveness. Like I've experienced those things with teenagers, but more times than not, the parents aren't there. He's like, isn't there a problem with that? And man, it rattled me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not at all implying that the church isn't important, but there is something fundamentally wrong when we outsource. We don't outsource ball games. We don't outsource dance recitals. We don't outsource, band concert,
dramas,
plays.
band concert. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to what we think is the most important thing in our kid's life, we'll let, when I started, a 20-something-year-old snotty-nosed college guy experience the most important spiritual decisions of our kids' lives, and I won't be there. Mm-hmm. And so what it has done is it has forced me to kind of take a look at what are we doing, because mom and dad, regardless of whether you're youth leader or your children's guy or the next gen ministry, is you're still the primary spiritual influence. Mm-hmm. How do we help mom and dad get in the game? Yeah. Because mom and dad shouldn't miss those moments. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of what we've been wrestling with. And I think part of it is because we've so complicated the end for parents that, like when I said this last week in the interview, when I get overwhelmed, I just don't do anything. And I think that's where a lot of parents are. Like, right. I'm overwhelmed because I don't know what to do. So we don't do anything. In that, there's so much there. I mean, there is, what is the church doing that it needs to do different? What are the parents need to start taking more ownership on? Right. And I think those conversations, one of the questions that I believe was Andy Stanley said he would ask his kids every night, and you probably know exactly what I'm getting ready to say, but he would just sit down next to him. Now, this is like the pastor of pastors, right? He sits down next to his kids every night, and he would go, "How's your heart? How's your heart?" Yeah.
That was it. Because what did that do? That set him up to start hitting markers.
Right.
Love, joy. Oh, right. He's struggling with patience right now. Yeah. My child is struggling with really loving somebody because they were hurt. And that's that simple question right there. Even before bed. And if you're a parent listening and you're like, well, I don't know what to do when they tell me that, it's like, it's okay. It's bedtime. Yeah. Go put them to bed. And go, then let's go figure this out. Let's find out.
And part of the reason we as parents don't know what to do is because our parents didn't ask us these questions. And the brilliance of Andy's question is it helps, especially young men, begin to identify feelings. Where we've almost been taught to, Joe Ehrman talks about toxic masculinity in America, and he says that you could summarize the toxic masculinity in America around three things: the billfold, the boardroom, and the ball field. And when he talks about ball fields, he's obviously talking about our hyper focus on sports. But his point is it's the only place in America where boys can let out emotion.
Yeah, it's okay to cry.
It's okay to cry. Yeah. Or you can express emotion, but we will make sure if you express the wrong emotion, you won't express that emotion and you'll turn it to anger. Yeah. Like, there's no crying in baseball. Thank you, Tom Hanks. Right. That's right. But we'll make sure you take that and you turn it. Well, no wonder, those young men growing up on ball fields become dads. And that's what happened with my dad. He was so horribly parented that much of what he was doing was out of default. Like, that's what you just go back
Vietnam veteran.
Exactly. Yeah. And growing up in the middle of a cotton field, and his dad didn't give a rip. So no wonder he's treating me the way he treated me. And he was smart enough in the later part of his life to go, that wasn't good. I messed up on that. So, that simple question, though, helps a kid start identifying their emotions, which... I mean, heads up, husbands, if we don't identify our emotions, our wives try to identify them for us, and that's just a recipe for disaster.
It is, yeah. And I think and when people hear you go, oh, he doesn't believe in masculinity. No, it's a different. There's toxic masculinity. Then there's masculinity. There's the grit portion that we do have to develop kids that are able, like you said, to withstand those difficult and trouble.
What we did, the way we did, twisted. The way we did it with Grant, he had, our son is the oldest. He had two younger siblings, both, sisters. Right. Yeah. And he wasn't allowed to touch his sisters. So we called it opening up the bottle. And what we would tell him is take all these motions that you feel and put them in a bottle. And when you go play football, open the bottle up.
And he went to Duke and played football.
And he would, there were a couple of times where I would look at Kelly and go, the bottle is full and being emptied. We got really worried when he started playing football, that he's going to get hurt. And literally halfway through his first year, I was like, I'm scared he's going to hurt somebody.
It's like, how do you hit so hard? My family's crazy.
That's right. So, I'm just opening up a can. Have you met my sisters?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So let me ask you this, Stuart. We and this has been great. Let's talk to the parent in the room. I have not started these type of conversations with my child. Okay. This is, maybe faith is new to me. Here's some families that are going to listen to this. I'm the husband of a wife who has been going to church, and I come occasionally. But I'm hearing what's being said here. How do I get this started? How do we start moving forward and with taking that? If you're telling me I'm the spiritual leader of my home, how do I begin to do that?
Well, to go back to my intro when you talked about a leader worth following, everybody's a leader. Question is, are you a leader worth following? A leader worth following is going somewhere worth going, which has led us back to who is it that we want our children to be. I think every mom and dad needs to take a step back and have some discussions with themselves as a couple, because the last thing you want to do is have a mom that's on this page and a dad who's on another page.
That's good.
The goal is to get on the same page, and you need to do some heavy lifting and figure out who is it that God wants our children to be, and is that who we want them to be. This is going to sound harsh, Joey. You don't have to parent your children the way God wants you to parent them, but you also forfeit the right of complaining when they don't wind up
with the
way God intended and created them. You just forfeit that right. But if you can get on the same page, then it's just incremental consistency. It's that repetition of, our kids do not get bored with repetition. They get bored with presentation, and they get confused about our example. And so then it becomes a matter of, I want to be chronically consistent. I said that last week in the interview, that the signature of mediocrity is not an unwillingness to change. Everybody listening here, watching, wants to be a great parent, but can you not be chronically inconsistent? Because that's the signature of mediocrity. And I equate it to like me going to physical therapy every day. I came home from the hospital after being in a 20-plus day medically induced coma. I came home on a Friday, and I went to physical therapy on Monday, and I went to the physical therapy on Tuesday. And I just did it over and over and over and over and over and over. And I didn't jump from 30 pounds, losing 30 pounds to gaining 18 of it back like that. I didn't go from, I can barely lift the bar to being able to get close to what I used to bench when I was working out. It just takes time. The last thing I would say is the greatest gift you can give your children is for them to see a vulnerable, authentic dad. It's okay to go, I messed up. I cannot tell you how many times I have apologized to my children in a puddle of tears because I'm not, you nailed it. We are not perfect parents. This is will always be an amateur sport. And so the fact that we can look at our kids and go, I blew it. And if we can't say that, then we're setting our children up to fail, because they will become parents who don't think they can say I messed up. But you do what anybody does when they mess up. Failure is an event. It's not a person. You dust yourself off and you do better. And I think our kids, that in and of itself is a lesson to our children. That love is about forgiveness. Love is about asking for it. Love is about extending it. And let's try to be better. The great theologian Rocky Balboa said, the way the winning is done is you just keep moving forward. You keep moving forward.
That's right. That's good. The consistency thing here, working with teenagers, for 16 years now, 18 if you include when I was just a high school small group leader. You want to mess up a kid. Be severely inconsistent in your spiritual life. Because what you'll also do is you'll make demands of your kid, and the kid's like, well, why? I had a parent one time, and they were just, I'd never seen this parent before. Their kid came to church but wanted to meet with me, so I'll meet with them. And their big thing was, I want my child to be doing a quiet time every day. I mean, it was like, and I'm like, well, okay. Now let's put it in perspective here. The kid's almost done with high school, so he's like 16 to 18. I want to see this happening in my house every day, and I could tell that this was a checklist thing for this dad. And I said, and maybe I should have said this not with the kid in the room. But I just asked him, I said, how many times has he seen you doing one? And probably I was pretty young in ministry and could have handled it.
That is a great question.
But if you're asking for something, because he couldn't answer it.
That he's never modeled.
He's never modeled it. He's never been consistent in it, right. And it's like, well, you can't. And now, I think what happens, you realize he had 2 years left till his kid went to college.
It was the poop moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but being that consistent. But then at the same time, though, I mean, there are some parents out there that they're like, my kid is in college.
Yeah.
And I didn't do these things.
Right.
Right. And that's where, you're in the phase of adult parenting. You're parenting adults now.
And you know what I do more times than not is I ask for forgiveness. If I've been consistent in any way, it's that every time our kids woke up, I started a habit in my life long before our kids were older. For me to just have time to spend time with God, I would get, like, the older they got, the earlier I would wake up. So now it's a part of my DNA that I'm up at 5. So when they were coming downstairs from school, they see my Bible open, and I've, the problem with that, though, is what good does it do for you to have a quiet time if you act like a jerk?
Right. Yeah.
Because then
Dad should have slept in this morning.
Well, they're going, that thing doesn't work.
That's true. Yeah.
That Bible doesn't work. So, and then the other part too is, what good does it do you first of all, you've nailed it. We have to model that. But the other part of it is to model it and then constantly be critical of your child. Hear this well, moms and dads, having a 25-year-old, 23-year-old, and 20-year-old, 2 daughters and a son. Constantly criticizing your children does not cause your children to stop loving you. It causes them to stop loving themselves. And what they'll do is they will put on a front and act to please you in the process of hating themselves. And the best thing that we can do, it doesn't mean that you're not constructively critical of your children, but if you're constantly critical of your children, all you're doing is chipping away at the way that they see themselves. And let's remember that your son or daughter, regardless of where they are, has been created in the image of God. They are an image bearer, and we have a responsibility to make sure they know that. It's hard to do.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are times when your kids are going to worry the crap out of you and frustrate you. But my son and our son and daughters are image bearers. I have a responsibility to build that image up in them.
That's good.
Because they will never stop loving you. In fact, many of them will go through the rest of their life trying to earn your love because they thought they constantly disappointed you.
Yeah.
But they've stopped loving themselves.
Yep. Well, as we get wrapped up here, Stuart, I appreciate your time. Two things. One, let's give some parents that are listening a little bit of hope.
Okay.
And let's talk to the parents out there. The beautiful thing about faith that I tell people all the time is you can get started right now, right? Like these things that we talk about, we don't live life like this in the rear view. It's like, okay, what can I do today? So let's just talk about for just a few minutes, like, if you're that parent and you're like, hey, I want to get started now, and it not being a fire hydrant, like, how do we help parents? Hey, let's just start with some small things, some simple things.
Tomorrow morning, get up before your children, some way, somehow, whether it's you open your Bible, you get some sort of devotional, but spend time with God. I would encourage you to read 1 John. Just dive in there and see how much. I mentioned this today, but I think it would be a great journey for every parent to go through the entire New Testament and just highlight the word love. It will freak you out. It will freak you out.
Never done that. Yeah.
It will freak you out how often it's in there. And it's made me go, how did I miss this? So, but begin that habit. Because again, that is you learning how to express love to the one who loves you, and we have been made by love to love and be loved. And I think a simple prayer of just, God, help me to love the way you love, help me to love my children the way you love me. Yeah. Help me to develop love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, and then express it.
Yep.
Act on it. It's that, it really is that simple. Yeah. That's the thing. It's so much, love is so much more simple, but it's so stinking messy and complicated. Because here's what's going to happen. I'm just going to let you know, as soon as you start doing that, there's going to be a fender bender.
Yeah, right.
Your teenager who just started learning how to drive runs into something, or somebody gets hurt, or there's a bully. Or your child is the bully, something will happen, and then now you've stress tested. Okay, can I be kind? Love is kind. Anything else, and it's not love. Yeah, can I be kind? Because and especially for those of us that haven't done that, your children may pass out. It would be the equivalent of your kid getting up and making up their bed without you having to tell them.
Right. Yeah.
You're kind to your kid, and they may just like, what is wrong with Dad? Why? He was nice. Yeah. And I messed up. You do that enough, and your kid starts noticing that. And at some point, they're like, what happened to Dad? Yeah. I like this version of him. Well, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. Those are things that have happened. That fruit is growing. I think it's that simple.
I talked to several guys who are on deployments. So we may have guys listening to this that are sitting in the middle of Iraq right now. And it's like, I've told guys, like, your deployment could be some of the greatest, like, prepping the soil for when you return home.
Yes,
I said because as hard as it is, you do have those times where it's just you and God. And I was like, so I'm like, read that Bible, begin praying for your kids, take those moments. And the dads that take that seriously, they come back and their families are different because of it. But
see, I can't even fathom that. Like,
gone 9 months,
those men and women doing what they're doing for a living and then coming home, that just blows my mind.
I mean,
that's such a transfer to some degree of things. So kudos to them. I mean, salute.
And a lot of times they're the guys that I'm talking to. There's no way I could. Yeah. I was like, yes, you can.
Yes,
you can. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world, whether it's your living room or, Islamabad. It doesn't matter. Like, those are places that you can begin this even now. So, parents, hope you're encouraged. Stuart, as we wrap up, what are some resources, books or things you're reading or things that you've looked at or thought through? Like,
I did make a list.
Okay, cool. Give us some of those. And we'll put them on the, we're going to create a store for our parents.
Since we're talking so much about love, I think it would be incredibly helpful for every mom and dad to read the book Love Does and Everybody Always by Bob Goff.
Yeah.
Those two books are mainstays in our house. Bob Goff also has a devotional book called Live in Grace, Walk in Love. It's a daily devotional, and it is unbelievable. The cool thing about Bob is that he's created children's books to go along with Love Does and Everybody Always. So those would be great to get for your kids.
Yeah, we'll put them on the site. Yeah,
I'm a huge Enneagram guy. I think it's important for us to understand the personality makeup of our kids. So Ian Cross is the guru of the Enneagram. For those of you who don't know, Enneagram is like a personality deal, but he has a book called The Road Back to You. And I would highly recommend that all parents read that and begin to try to figure out what is the personality of your children. And then the last book I would recommend is Dare to Lead by Brene Brown.
Okay.
That book, as a dad, it has so helped me. One of the things she talks about, she builds everything around the Theodore Roosevelt quote about being in the arena and, being in the dust, sweating, and it's the person in the arena that counts. But one thing that it's allowed me to do, because everybody, and I've even said this before, I was an unbelievable parent when I was parenting my non-existent children, hypothetically.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
And then I became a parent, and it seems like the people who have the loudest opinions about parents or parenting have never been parents.
Yeah.
And what this book has allowed me to do is to say, unless you're in the arena with me, that's the cheap seats, and I have no use for your opinion.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of helped me go, okay, who are the people that I want speaking into my life? And if they're not wrestling things to the ground on the arena floor like me, I really don't have time for your opinion. That would be a great thing for all of us, by the way.
Sure. Yeah. Because
in every arena.
there's opinions out there.
Yes. Yes, they're
all over the place.
Yes.
Well, Stuart, man, I really appreciate.
Are we doing rapid fire questions? Shoot me some rapid fire
questions. Craziest youth pastor story. Craziest youth pastor story. Because you said earlier you're a youth pastor. Every youth pastor has crazy stories.
Okay.
So talk to me.
I will tell you one, but the one I want to tell you that nobody would believe me is I actually had two encounters with the same woman who was a self-proclaimed witch.
Ooh.
And she tried to curse myself and my family. I have eyewitnesses. The story is so bizarre and crazy that usually when I tell it, everybody's like, man, you're lying. But I have witnesses, including my wife.
If this was the Joe Rogan podcast, he'd be like, let's talk about witches. Tell me what she looked like. We're not going to go there, but
she looked like Mufasa.
She was doing some awesome baby.
But, okay, crazy story. Should I tell the van story? Is that what you want me to tell? So when I was in Louisiana, we go whitewater. We did a senior trip every year. One year we go to Atlanta. We drove up north of Atlanta to a place called Ducktown, Tennessee, and that's where they did the whitewater rafting during the '96 Olympics in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So class 4, class 5 rapids. It's awesome. So we go whitewater rafting up there, and then we were going to drive back. Now, this is long before Google Maps on your phone. Yeah. We were going to drive back to a place called Dahlonega, Georgia, and go to this, it's like a family-style restaurant called the Smith House. And I'd eaten there, and it would be perfect because we were worn out.
Yeah.
Well, stupid Stuart doesn't do the math well. And you're in the beginning of the Smoky Mountain, the Appalachian Trail right in there.
Yeah.
So all the roads are up and down mountains.
Yeah.
And so we're late. I'm driving a van of 2 or 3 vans, probably 3 vans, maybe more. I'm driving a van, and I'm the lead van. And we're not speeding because you can't, because it's just. But we are pressing the limits.
You're Mario Karting that stuff.
We are Mario Karting that stuff. And like kids are in the van I'm getting sick. I'm getting nauseated. Yeah. And I'm like, we're going to the Smith House.
I'm getting sick. We're gonna eat gravy.
That's right. Yeah, you're gonna have country fried steak. So we're booking. Well, this is before cell phones too. So all of a sudden, my associate, the lead pastor I just mentioned earlier, he calls me like, "Bro, there's smoke billowing out from under your van." And I'm like, "Oh gosh, the engine! The last thing I need to do is blow up an engine."
Right.
So we finally get to a pullover. We pull over, and the engine isn't on fire. We have been going around I was trying hard not to hit the brakes, but we've been going around these windy roads so fast that our tires are literally smoking. And so we get concerned, like, dude, if our tires burn up, we're dead, So this was long before. This sounds awful that I'm about to say this, but I'm old enough to say it. This is long before people would just walk around with water bottles.
Oh, yeah. Pre-bottled water.
Pre-bottled
that time
water.
Existed.
Yes, that time did exist.
100%.
And nobody was carrying around thermoses or anything.
No, we got it from our faucet.
Right. We may have had sodas, but
right.
So I think we took whatever sodas we had. Well, that didn't help. We don't have any water. We're on the side of a mountain. And so we made all the girls go and stand on the tree line and face the wilderness and do not turn around. And we put our female chaperones behind them and just like, turn around. and we got all the boys to circle the tires, and we peed on the tires.
Gotta cool them off, baby.
There is nothing worse than high school senior urine full of Mountain Dew and burn rubber. The smell will be with me forever. That's number one. Number two, it worked.
It worked.
It worked.
There you go.
We put out the fire and didn't make it to the Smith house, and it closed by the time we got there, all because we had to take a pee break. And we wound up at a Pizza Hut.
There you go.
So yeah, that's a crazy one.
I love it.
One of many.
I love it. Well, Stuart, thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank
We're going
you,
to go out
Johnny.
to a little bit of music again.
I could tell the story about the time I smoked at Crowder Ridge on that goofy patio at 11 o'clock at night.
No power.
No power.
We need you to keep talking. Just come up here. Yeah, shine a light.
And one kid comes up to me afterwards. That was the best talk I've ever heard. I only spoke for 10 minutes. That is not a compliment.
We got some people in our church that tell us that. Short sermons, those are the best one ever. I appreciate that, brother. May God be with you. Thanks so much, Stuart, for being with us.
JT, are you with me?
Oh, the RenoFam Podcast brought to you by Renovation Church. We'll see you next time.